When you think of investors, right, I'm sure you guys have had ideas in the past and you've thought of different things. Like, how do you perceive the investments? Really cool, interesting people. When you think of investors, right, I'm sure you guys have had ideas in the past and you've thought of different things. Like, how do you perceive the investment situation and how do you even process that? And Carl, you can also one in that situation now with Maxine. You know, what do you think about investors generally with the whole process? What does that mean to you?
Well, I can say first that my preconceptions and my current understanding are different after, like having experiences like meeting you at GRC and, starting to talk more to people and even looking into it myself, which we can follow up with after. But like working with a material like Maxine, it's
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the It's a Material World podcast. So for today's episode, it's going to be a little bit different. We have two new faces joining us. Well, one is Kyle Matthews, who has been a guest on our podcast and has been a key member of the It's a Material World team. And then we also have Keong Chen, who is the co-director at OTB Ventures. And so we're basically going to have a conversation where we kind of blend the worlds of business and, venture capitalism, as well as material science and nanotechnology, and try to bring a ton of value to our material science-based audience while just seeing kind of how things go here. So it'll be a little bit of a change of pace, but I'm excited to jump into this conversation. And I just wanted to say welcome to the show, Keong.
Oh, thanks very much, Beneath. Nice to meet you guys virtually.
For sure. So go ahead, Kyle.
No, I was going to say, just to start out, thanks for having me on as well. It's great to be on as a guest again and, to have a nice conversation with you guys. Yeah, let's definitely, we can start since the guests have already met me somewhat. Why don't we start with a Keong introduction?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I have a little bit of a unusual background, I think, in terms of my career development. I've been self-employed effectively for over 15 years now and have been doing early stage investing for most of that time. I often get asked, it's actually the worst question. People come up to me and ask me what I do, and Carl knows this from real life experience when we met at the GRC in Ventura Beach. And I was like, I find it really hard to explain because what I do is there's not much difference in my personal life and what I do, if that makes sense. So I suppose developed a skill set and a set of experience now where I just love looking at new things. And I'm just very, very fortunate to have grown up with a peer group of my friends in Australia, particularly in Perth, where I live, Western Australia, and in Sydney, which I think a lot of people know where that city's at. But I've grown up with a peer group of people who are effectively, I'm part of this really dynamic, very, very diverse set of backgrounds of people who love investing in early stage things. And and the reason why I wanted to, and I thank you guys for having me on the podcast. I think that it's one of my moral obligations really is to provide a bit of context for emerging scientists and researchers in material science, because I think material science is much. I was thinking about on the plane. I'm in Boston at the moment. I was thinking on the plane, the flight up, but I think it's kind of like maybe something like when the internet started, a little bit like that, because I'm seeing the same kind of things, which, I was quite young. I wasn't really ready for that phase. But I think where we're going now with decarbonization and where the world is going, making things better, faster, lighter, with less emissions, really being serious about the environmental issues that we're all facing and how important material science is that. I think it's the right time to make investing a little bit more relevant and getting away from the fact that, it suits in boardrooms. It certainly isn't. Not in my world. It may be in certain pockets of the world, but not in my world. And I just want to take this opportunity to speak to everyone listening to the podcast and try to provide a little bit of my point of view. And hopefully people can take that away and go, well, maybe I've got this really crazy idea, but I've been thinking about it for a long time. I think I just want to talk to someone and really it can make a huge difference. And that's how the world works. And it's not about boardrooms and PowerPoints.
I love that. So I'm just curious, since you had it's a background that's unique compared to a lot of our previous guests. So I'm just curious, how did you find the material science space? Like, how did you get in touch with Kyle, and how did you enter this area and get interested in nanotechnology and material science and engineering as a whole?
Yeah. So thanks, Smith. I don't have a research background. I've got a corporate background. I'm I suppose a capital markets person. But I have a real interest in things. I think that it's maybe one of my unusual skill sets is I actually prefer to go out into the labs and the universities and wherever the people are to talk to them, to be able to try to understand what they're trying to say, rather than, like I keep saying, I said a few times, sitting in the boardroom looking at PowerPoint and getting someone to explain, their whole life to me in terms of what they're thinking in half an hour. I just don't think that's a great way to do it. But how I met Carl was, was really fortunate. We spun out a battery company out of the University of Adelaide in late last year, and that company is now being acquired by another company, funnily enough, just last week by a listed company. So that's going down a different path now. But when I met Carl, one of the professors at the University of Adelaide, I asked her, does she know anyone in the States that she could refer me to? She's a battery person, right? And she said, yeah, I know this guy called Yuri. And I said, oh, who's Yuri? So I looked him up and said, oh, this Ukrainian guy in Philadelphia. That's kind of strange. I messaged Yuri, and Yuri said, you know what? Yeah, Carl, you know what Yuri's like. He said, yeah, come to LA to this GRC conference. And I went, I had no idea what he's talking about. I had zero clue, but I just thought, I just something instinctively went, I think I should go. I think, and I talked to my wife. I said, I think I should go to this thing. And they're going, what the heck are you doing? Like, where, why? I said, well, I looked at the format and I didn't really know. And I think, Carl, you've spoken about GRC formats in previous podcasts, but they're really, really, it's like sitting in a camp for a week where you basically just hang around these brilliant people day after day after day. But I had no idea. So I looked at the agenda. It looked like a dormitory style thing. And I went. And I remember very clearly, it's actually on my LinkedIn somewhere, or I must have posted it, that first night, Carl, I don't know where you were, but I remember there's a photo of Yuri, Stan, Whittingham, and Shirley, and myself. The first night. I mean, that's just, what's that? So I think there's another thing in this is that not just for myself, but, and I think one of the things that should resonate is that if you've got a chance to do something, it's really, trust me, going on that plane, going to LA, not knowing anyone, I don't know what's going to happen. It was kind of scary, a little bit awkward, right? But if I hadn't done that, then I certainly wouldn't have met Carl, I certainly wouldn't have met yourself, I certainly would be having this discussion. So it's really important to say, right, if you have the opportunity and you've got the time, you've got the health to do it, I think it's a good idea to take the opportunity because you just never know. And that's how we ended up in this situation. I think going to material science, it was in my mind. I knew broadly, thematically, it was really important, but I never had any idea that it was so interesting and there were so many investment opportunities, let alone really brilliant people to talk to.
So you said yourself that you're not really from a research background and you don't know too much about like the fundamentals of like maybe some of the things that they're talking about in more detail. I'm just curious, like from your perspective, I'm sure you hear all these great ideas all the time.
Oh, yeah.
How do you kind of differentiate which ones you think are the best and which ones are maybe ones that you would pass on when you don't when you're not a cutting edge research scientist, because I'm sure you see the whole range of ideas.
Yeah, David, that's a really good question and one I get asked a lot. I think there's another way to look at it. Even leading edge scientists find other people's researchers' ideas. You can ask 10 researchers, and Carl, you know this. You ask 10 researchers one on the subject matter, you probably get 10 opinions. It's something like that. I watch very carefully, David, like when, in the conferences, even though Carl, at the GRC and things like that, I may appear like I'm half asleep. Sometimes I am. But I'm watching people's body language and I'm watching how people are receptive. People stop playing with their laptops and phones. That's generally a good signal that there's something really important going here. And then you also find when you go out and have drinks after the presentations, and you talk about, oh yeah, what do you think of the presentations? It actually comes up pretty consistent. The good ones they talk about, and I would make a deliberate. I mean, this is in terms of the conference, but I would make a note to say, look, I've just got to say hello to this person, and just say, look, this is kind of what I do. And certainly, Dave, I tell them straight up, I got no idea. I have no science background, but would you be able to explain to me what you were talking about? And I think the good researchers can. I think that's part of their role. Essentially, they're teachers, right? They're teaching, so they've got to be able to relate. And I think if something is really good and really meaningful, they can explain it, and I'll understand it. And then we can go to the next step. And I think now, David, I think I've created a little bit of a network of people who don't mind, Carl included, they don't mind looking at the stuff for me, all different types. I can have a battery project, but I can have non-battery people look at it too, because I appreciate the different perspectives. Because sometimes, as Carl knows, battery people can be very biased on a particular type of technology. It could be solid state. That's the best thing since sliced bread. Yeah, I think so. But how about people who don't know too much about it and they can read the journals and look at the research and have a think about a lot of it, David, it's also it's a person thing. It's really a person thing. Obviously, there's a lot of personalities, and I think, Carl, it wouldn't be too far to say there's a lot of egos in the room sometimes, and I think you just gotta be able to relate to someone as and you really like them. You like this person, and they've got some really cool research. Then we can move on next stage. But no matter how good the research is, if I don't get the vibe and I feel like it's a bit strange, I'll probably just park it for a while and then let it see what happens from there.
Yeah, from that, I can definitely say, like, from my initial experience, like when I met Kyung at GRC, which I spoke about the last time I was here, you're going to basically be faced with superstar research the whole time because you're at GRC. That's the point. But you have to differentiate it at the next level. In the end, it's people. People are presenting this research, and the research was done by researchers. So, I think even though like Kyung doesn't have this science background, he still has the people background. And that's kind of like what allows you to get that initial step in. And then, yeah, at some point you're going to have to start mixing, sifting through the mud, so to say, to pick out what makes sense, maybe start getting some consultations from people who have like a deeper technical background. But I would say that initial part, like I remember distinctively, like there was like a few talks where, like I sat through them and I was like, those were amazing talks. Like they were all amazing, but some in particular, like I remember like had me sitting down, like I was writing down everything, and probably, Kyung saw, I wasn't the only one that was writing down every word, and he can see that and know like, they must be talking about something important. So, it definitely goes hand in hand.
So, Kyung, I'm just curious then. I know you mentioned, or Kyle mentioned, like people, right? And so, technology aside for just a moment, what kind of key characteristics are you looking for in the leaders that you end up deciding to partner with, or deciding to invest in, both monetarily and just investing your time into these people? Are there kind of common characteristics that you see, either from like the leadership perspective, or just like you said, the ability to communicate, etc.?
Oh, look, yeah, that's a great question, Beneath. I don't think I certainly wouldn't look at it from a point of view like, it needs to be like they need to be excellent communicators. I mean, they may not communicate very well. And oftentimes, researchers are generally quite introverted. And that's not you, Carl. You're a different guy, but as we know. But generally, a lot of them are really introverted. How do you get them in a situation where they're comfortable to talk to an investor? And actually, I think people forget. I mean, they know I invest in stuff, but they forget, like, because we're just talking. I think what I'm trying to find in these people is I want to see the passion. I want to see, like, this is not just like research to get their PhD or for publish something. I can feel when they're just like, I've just been thinking about this. I've been researching for a long time, and I really want to get this out into the real world. Like, this is important. And I think once I get that sense, then we can have the discussion, and then it becomes more like a vibe thing. It's a chemistry thing and it's a people thing. I was actually, here's a good example. So where was I yesterday? I was in Knoxville. I was in Knoxville last night, and I got there because someone I knew, really senior